Several times over the last few weeks, conversations about music have turned to the Beatles. There is something about their music, I believe, that has actually become a part of our DNA. Everyone knows or can at least hum their songs. So let me begin tonight by sharing the words of Rabbis Lennon and McCartney. All you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love, love, love is all you need. See, there you go, right? What I would like to do is amend or place my own little gloss on these words. All you need is revolutionary love. Let me share 3 vignettes that might help us understand this a little differently. Author and counselor Charles Shedd reports getting this note on his kitchen counter after some unresolved conflict with his wife. Dear Charlie, I hate you. Love, Martha. Love. A man tried everything he could think of to eradicate the weeds in his lawn. Finally, in desperation, he wrote to his local Department of Agriculture, asking advice and listing every method that he had used thus far. He received a reply back. It said, "We suggest you learn to love them." Love. After vaccinating a young boy with an injection in his arm, a doctor wanted to stick a bandage on it. "Please put it on the other arm," the boy pleaded. "Why do that?" the doctor asked. "This will let everyone know that you have been vaccinated and they won't hit your sore arm." "Please, please put it on the other arm," the boy begged. "You don't know the kids at my school." See, but the boy did, and wasn't about to let him hit his vaccinated arm. We adults, too, are pretty good at hiding pain. Not usually physical pain, but the kind of pain that's harder to see. I understand this, we understand this even more keenly as we experience the bubble in which we live here on the North Shore. There's a certain pressure to hide what hurts, to be great when anyone asks you how you're doing. Social media has only added to this phenomenon. We like to appear as if we are in control. We can handle whatever life throws at us. We're up top of it. And too often, we end up going it alone. No one understands. No one is there to help. We strive to hide our wound even more. Susan Muto, in her book, Blessings That Make Us Be, tells the story of a great ruler who needed a second in command to help manage the kingdom. When he finally selected the right person, he took him outside on the balcony of the palace where they could gaze over all the lands under his jurisdiction. His assistant asked the king, "Master, what must I remember most of all if I am to carry out your wishes?" "My son," the king replied, "there is only one directive to follow, and that is to look upon the people as wounded." The wise king knew that everyone is in pain in some ways. Wounds may not show, but they are there. Discover where people hurt, and you can reach them. Learn where the invisible bandages are, and you'll know how to help them, how to love them. All we need is this kind of revolutionary love. Revolutionary love is a phrase coined by Valerie Kaur, an activist, lawyer, mother, and Sikh. I first heard about her from a colleague who guided me to the TED Women Talk she did a while ago. 3 lessons of revolutionary love in a time of rage. She asserts that it is time to reclaim love as a public ethic. Love has been captured by greeting cards and pop songs as personal and romantic, too fickle and sentimental to be a revolutionary force. Know that the greatest social reformers in history grounded entire movements in the ethic of love. She speaks about episodes in her own life that led her to create the Revolutionary Love Project. As a little girl growing up in California, where her family has lived and farmed for a century, she was told she would go to hell because she was not a Christian. She was called a black dog because she was not white. When she ran to her grandfather's arms, she says, Papa Ji dried my tears and gave me the words of Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith. I see no stranger, he said, Nanak. I see no enemy. She says her grandfather taught her that she could choose to see all the faces she meets and wonder about them. And if you wonder about them, then you will listen to their stories even when it's hard. You will refuse to hate them, he said, even when they hate you. You will even vow to protect them when they are in harm's way. That's what it means to be a Sikh, to walk the path of a warrior saint. Kaur was 20 years old when she watched the Twin Towers fall. She says, the horror stuck in my throat. And then a face flashes on the screen, a brown man with a turban and a beard. And I realize that our nation's new enemy looks exactly like my grandfather. And these turbans, meant to represent our commitment to serve, cast us as terrorists. And Sikhs became targets of hate alongside Muslims. The first person killed in a hate crime after 9/11 was a Sikh man standing in front of his gas station in Arizona. It was a man who was a Kaur family friend that Valerie called uncle, murdered by a man who called himself a patriot. Just about a week ago, Sandeep Dalwal, a sheriff's deputy in Harris County, Texas, was the first Sikh to join the force there. He was shot and killed at a traffic stop. Valerie Kaur visited the widow of the man that she called uncle. She says, I wept with her, and I asked her, what would you like me to tell the American people? She looked at me and said, tell them thank you. 3,000 Americans came to my husband's memorial. They did not know me, but they wept with me. Tell them thank you. Thousands of people showed up because the local media told his story. You see, stories can create the wonder that turns strangers into sisters and brothers. For Kaur, this was her first lesson in revolutionary love, that stories can help us see no stranger. She returned to the gas station where this man she called uncle was killed 15 years to the day. She set down a candle in the spot where he bled to death. She and this man's brother, they set down a candle on a spot where he bled to death. Kaur continues, my heart is beating in my ears because they decided to call the murderer on the phone. As the phone was ringing, she was seized with anxiety in that moment. She hears the voice of Frank Roque, a man who once said, I'm going to go out and shoot some towelheads. We should kill their children too. Why, she asks Frank, why did you agree to speak with us? Frank says, I'm sorry for what happened. But I'm also sorry for all the people who were killed in 9/11. He fails to take responsibility. Kaur became angry to protect Rana, the brother of this murdered man. But Rana is still wondering about Frank, wondering, listening. And he responds, Frank, this is the first time I'm hearing you say that you feel sorry. And Frank says, yes, I am sorry for what I did to your brother. One day when I go to heaven to be judged by God, I will ask to see your brother, and I will hug him, and I will ask him for forgiveness. And Rana, this man's brother, says, we already forgave you. How can this be true? Well, forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is freedom from hate. Because when we are free from hate, we see the ones who hurt us not as monsters, but as people who themselves are wounded, who themselves feel threatened, who don't know what else to do with their insecurity but to hurt us, to pull the trigger or cast the vote or pass the policy aimed at us. But if some of us begin to wonder about them, listen even to their stories, we learn that participation in oppression comes at a cost. The cost? The ability to love. This was Kaur's second lesson in revolutionary love. We love our opponents when we tend the wound in them. The choice to love our opponents is moral and it is pragmatic. And it opens us up to the previously unimaginable possibility of reconciliation. We see each other as wounded. We acknowledge our own wounds. We see each other and open ourselves to love, revolutionary love that can change the world. But remember, it took Kaur and Rana 15 years to make that phone call to Frank Roque. Each had to tend to their own rage and grief first. Loving our opponents requires us to love ourselves. Gandhi, King, Mandela. They taught a lot about how to love others and opponents. They didn't talk a lot about loving ourselves. But the Torah does. In Leviticus, we read, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. The great Torah commentator Rashi taught that this verse tells us that before we can love another, we must first love ourselves. This is the first command to love with a revolutionary love. Joy is the gift of love. Grief is the price of love. Anger is the force that protects it. This is the third lesson in revolutionary love. Loving just ourselves feels good, but it's narcissism. Loving only our opponents is self-loathing. Loving only others is ineffective. We need to practice all three forms of love to make it revolutionary love. In order to love others, see no stranger. We can train our eyes to look upon strangers on the street, on the subway, on the bus, on the screen, and say in our minds, brother, sister, uncle, aunt. And when we say this, what we are saying is, you are a part of me I do not yet know. I choose to wonder about you. I will listen for your stories and defend you when you are in harm's way. Judaism tells us through the story of creation that we come from the same original parents created in the image of God. The Torah portion tomorrow morning instructs us to understand that we were all at Sinai together, bound by the covenant that calls for revolutionary love. We are a community of connection. In order to love our opponents, tend the wound. Can you see the wound in the ones who hurt you? Can you wonder even about them? And if this question sends panic through your body, then the most revolutionary act is to wonder, to listen, to respond to your own needs. This is what allows Esau to embrace his brother Jacob after 20 years. He sees himself as wounded and is able to see that his brother Jacob is also wounded, literally limping. Revolutionary love is expressed in their tearful embrace. Let me lift up another remarkable embrace fueled by revolutionary love. Ex-policewoman Amber Geiger was convicted of murdering Botham Jean as she mistakenly entered his apartment instead of her own and was sentenced to prison for this murder. In court, Botham Jean's younger brother Brandt, in a victim impact statement after the sentencing, told Amber Geiger he forgave her and he loved her as he would any other person. He asked the judge if he could hug Geiger, and the two embraced. Geiger sobbed. Judge Tammy Kemp then got off the bench and spoke with Jean's family members and embraced them as well. And then the judge and Geiger embraced. In order to love ourselves, breathe, push. When we are pushing into the fires in our bodies, our anger, or the fires in the world, we need to be breathing together. In order to be pushing together, think lamaz. Breathing is the body's natural response to treating pain. How are you breathing each day? Who are you breathing with? Because when executive orders and news of violence hit our bodies hard, sometimes less than a minute apart, it feels like we are being physically assaulted. Breathing is also a way of re-ensoling ourselves. On Shabbat, and Yom Kippur is called the Sabbaths of Sabbaths, Shabbat Shabbaton. On Shabbat, this is a part of our prayer, the prayer that we sing, Vishamru, Shavat Vayinafash, right? Rested and was re-ensouled. We are re-ensouled on the Sabbath, restoring our capacity to love our fellow Jews, our fellow human beings. Revolutionary love is an embodiment of meaningful connection. When we jointly recited the Vidui earlier in our worship, and again tomorrow morning, this confessional, you might have seen people beating their chest with their fist. Now, this has never been a part of my particular practice, not to Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu. But I recently learned a beautiful teaching that offers an emendation of the custom and a new understanding that does resonate with me. Instead of beating yourself on the chest, knock softly with an open fist as you recite the Vidui. This is connecting to a verse from the Song of Songs, this beautiful love poem that describes God's love for us. Kol dodi dofeket. The voice of my beloved knocks. Open to me. So it is not an act of self-flagellation. Instead, it reflects an opening of our hearts as God gently knocks to be let in, to open our hearts to revolutionary love. Tomorrow afternoon, the words of Leviticus 19 will be chanted. We will hear, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now is the time for love. revolutionary love, a love that opens us up to wonder, to hear the stories, to tend to the wound in ourselves and in others. As Valerie Kaur says, see in the darkness of this world, not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb. Our future is not dead. It is waiting to be born.